Welcome to the Higher Education Access Corner. I'm your host, Tiffanie, and I'm excited today to have a very special guest with me. Her name is Lyren Bowman. She is also a FIA employee. Lyren, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and today's topic, we're going to be talking about the non-traditional learner. Something about Lyren, she considers herself to be a career student. And I'm very familiar with career students. From time to time, I've learned to be a career student as well. But I wanted her to kind of start out and tell us, what makes you think you're a career student, so to speak, and tell us about your journey thus far as being a career student.
So as you said, I am a self-proclaimed career student. I started out this journey fresh out of high school, 2005. Oh my gosh, that's a long time. But I started my first college experience at Coppin State University down in Baltimore, Maryland. A few years from there, came home. You guys know life happens. Tried to get back into the educational world as a student, I believe around 2007 at Central Penn. Did not like it. It was not for me. Took some time off around 2010-ish. I went ahead and looked into Harrisburg Area Community College. Started taking maybe one class, two classes here. I found that I really did like the program. I liked the professors, so I continued on. 2012, life happened again. You guys know about personal life experiences, so had my daughter. In 2012, I thought I could continue to do both motherhood and go to school, taking on a full workload, 8 to 5 here at FIA was not possible. Took some more time off once Destiny became a little bit older, which is my daughter. I finally was able around this would now be about 2017-ish, I was finally able to establish a strong and firm foundation to get my studies in order, along with being a mother, along with being a full-time worker here at FIA. And then graduated 2023 with my associates in business administration, and I am currently wrapping up my bachelor's in December for organizational leadership at Penn State World Campus.
All right, nice. So I wanted you to share the journey, and I'll be honest for our listeners, I want them to know how this particular topic came about. So you and I were at an event for FIA, work event, and we were talking about the podcast, and you broached this idea for the non-traditional student and the non-traditional learner, because you were saying with some things like, you've been at FIA for quite some time and you didn't know so many of the different resources that really could have helped you at the beginning of your journey. And it was a great discussion because it's a real topic. A lot of times we gear everything towards what we call your traditional student. Your traditional student meaning that student who goes to high school, straight out of high school, they're rolling right into a post-secondary school. But you were like, there were so many different benefits that you think, someone could really use that would help them along the way. So I thank you, number one, for saying, hey, here's an important topic, and I'm happy to share, and I want to let the rest of the folks on the podcast who are listening know about it. Where did that passion come from to actually say, hey, this is an important topic, and I want to talk about it?
I've been thinking about higher education for a very long time, as you can see. And one of the major issues I found myself constantly running into is that financial aid portion of it. When I first started my journey back in, like I said, 2005, I was an out-of-state student, knew nothing about financial aid, knew nothing about college expenses, knew nothing of the sort. So when I couldn't go back there because I owed an outstanding bill, I didn't have anyone to really fall back on to make up that difference. So that was really a part of the reason why I came home. Found a job at FIA. My goal was to work to pay off that debt and then go back and finish. But obviously that didn't happen. So within working at FIA, fast forward now to 2025, I've had many roles that I kind of learned as I went, the different scholarship opportunities, different grants that FIA, has out there for different majors, or your wherever you're coming from, either from school directly, or if you're currently in the work field and you want to either get your associates or get a bachelor's, or you want to go to a trade school. Like, there are so many programs that FIA does offer. And again, like I said, bit by bit, going through different roles, I would begin to unravel those layers of educational and financial support that FIA does offer. And I started thinking, oh man, I should have either asked questions, or I can't ask something that I knew nothing of. So just like I said, digging and digging and digging, it was like an onion. I just kept getting more layers and more layers, and peeling back more layers and more layers, and finding out more information, and doing the event with you. And I'm like, I see a lot of, students come up and ask, well, my mom told me to fill out my FAFSA. Can I get this, piece of information? Absolutely. Then the parents will come. I have a senior, I have a junior, can I have this information for them? Absolutely. So then they got me thinking, well, what happens if the parent's in school? Or what happens if we have that non-traditional learner that's currently working, like I was working, and they want to go back to school to either start or finish a degree, to either pivot in their current role, or they can, advance further on within their work career. So I felt that there was a space there that was untapped. And who better than me to discuss some of those journeys? Like, it's possible.
Because you're doing it, right?
I'm doing it.
Yeah, you are doing it.
Thankfully, I'm doing
you're doing it. You're right. And I think it's good that folks hear it. I probably want to back up for our viewers so that they understand what we mean when we say non-traditional students.
Okay.
So for non-traditional students, we mean those students who are older than 24.
Yes.
And then sometimes it could be maybe you're not older, maybe you started, like you mentioned, and then you're going back to school. So it's not that person who just had it's cut and dry, fresh out of high school, going through. Maybe you're older, maybe you're a working parent, maybe you are sometimes it's a veteran. Maybe they chose the military first and now they're going to come home, get themselves acclimated. It could be someone who's in a career, and like you said, they just want to pivot.
Absolutely. So
they want to find, a second career or a second thing. Sometimes you get folks who are retired. So it's that person who's venturing off in a manner that we generally don't highlight when we're talking about someone attending a college or a career school. Absolutely. So one of the questions that I have for you is, for someone who is thinking about pursuing higher education and they fall into that non-traditional category, what advice would you have for them about just beginning?
Commit to your thought. Your thoughts become actions, I believe. Believe in yourself and do your research. There are a plethora of resources out there. You have to take that first step in your journey, just like I had to take that first step. You have people in your ear all of the time. Don't do this. Of course, with the financial climate that we're currently in, it's too expensive for you to go back to school. Why are you doing this, that, and the third? If that is something that you truly want to do, believe in yourself first. Believe I can get this done. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be able to get it done in some way, shape, or form. And ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. You have to start somewhere. For me, it took a lot to start asking questions. And once I did, honestly, it's kind of what got me here, which is when I started talking to you. So
here's a question for you from that. You're like, it took a lot for you to begin to ask those questions. If you don't mind sharing why. Was it out of fear? Was it of kind of like, I don't know what I don't know? Wasn't right timing? What made you pause?
It was a lot of everything that you just said. It was encompassing. For one, I did not have the initial belief in myself that I could do it. For two, I felt that asking questions would kind of put me in a spotlight where, she doesn't know anything. So it was a lot of pride also. And lastly, like you said, just that fear of not knowing what I don't know. I don't know what to ask if I don't know what is out there. But again, you just have to start somewhere.
And then there are some other, because we do talk to non-traditional students or those adult learners, and we even hold sessions with them where there's the specific target audience at the moment, not as much. And so you're kind of like that inspiration for me that says maybe this upcoming school year I'm going to filter more non-traditional students and seminars and things like that into the place. But I do know fear is one of those things that keeps people from going. That's what made me ask you. But another thing I hear from folks is sometimes it's what's been a long time since I've been in school. There's the fear of starting over. What if I'm not smart enough? What if I can't keep up with technology and software? Like they're thinking, software and technology has totally changed. I'm not a computer person. How am I going to write a letter? There's some who are saying the last time I've written a paper, it was a typewriter, so that's, or a word processor. And some of our viewers won't even know what a word processor or a typewriter is, but it was real for them. So one of the things I always say, and I've said it time and time again on the podcast, is, fear sometimes is out there, but even with fear, you do it anyway. You're afraid,
Absolutely.
do it afraid. And that's always a big step. Another thing are resources that you mentioned. You didn't necessarily know where to go, and it was right here in the backyard, right? The entire time.
I literally could have saved myself so much money. But
but I think, you know what, if you don't know, you don't know.
Right.
Sometimes you're honed in and, hey, I'm using, you're going to FIA and it's a job for you. So if your job isn't on the other end,
For sure.
I think that's an opportunity then for us. And I don't know at what point, you started to realize, hey, these resources are here, but maybe that's a good opportunity for folks like myself who do this to make sure that the employees are well aware as, as
sure.
the outside is, regardless of where you're at with it. So again, that's a good thing that you've pointed out. But resources beyond FIA, I just want to share for those who are listening. So there's the federal government, Federal Department of Education, that's out there, and their website is studentaid.gov. And I've mentioned these before on our podcast. For FIA's website, FIA's is PHEAA.org for all of our viewers who are listening. And on our website, I will say, federal website as well as our website, there are underlying resources. Some are going to be specific, and it may actually mention non-traditional students. It does so for certain on studentaid.gov. But something else I always want everyone to remember is the information that's out there for the students, your traditional students. Most of that is going to apply for your non-traditional students. Not everything,
Right.
Because you're going to have some non-traditional students who will say, hey, you know what, I can only take on a part-time course load right now. So you may not be privy to all forms of financial aid. However, you won't know that until you know about those particular resources. Something else I mentioned, when you were talking about a couple of obstacles. Cost is number one.
Absolutely.
And I think you had even given me a couple of resources that when you were doing some research on your own behind the scenes, it was saying, hey, that's generally the biggest thing. And I would agree. Cost is usually that biggest deterrent. But if you don't do the research, if you don't try, if you don't see, what do you think, if you're a student that is out there, what's the biggest resource or biggest thing that they should look for when they're considering cost, when they're deciding on a school or on a major or whatever? Like, how does cost factor into that?
I think you just hit the nail on the head. The school that you go to, for one, your major, for two, I didn't know that majors cost different. What's required for your major is going to be different from others. So that could be an additional cost or an additional expense because of a lab or a book or things like that. Those things definitely do add up. In addition to that, I would say,
I would also say consider the type of student that you are or you plan to be. And what I mean by that is, depending on, if I'm thinking for me, if I'm going back to school, I need to know a couple things about myself. What does my lifestyle currently look like?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Am I that person that can, if my top school is about a 30-minute drive, can I fit that into my lifestyle with everything else that I have going on? It's going to cost more gas, it's going to take up more time, it's going to cut possibly into my study time, or can I manage to do that? Especially if it's a costlier school. In addition to that, if it's not, and say, you know what, I need to do this online. Can I take online courses and still receive financial aid if I qualify? Can I do?
On that one?
Yeah.
So I actually, when I went to HAC, I did do the travel back and forth between school, home, daycare, go to school. That was a lot. To your point, gas, books, childcare, depending on where you're at in your life, is a huge thing. So knowing that part, like you said, of your life is extremely important. Knowing if you want to either go to school online or face-to-face. Online doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
I've had to discipline and train myself to make that time. So it's about time management. It's about dedication. It's about really being honest and true to yourself, saying, hey, what can I possibly take on at this time, and not overextending yourself to the point where you're burnt out. Now you don't want to go back to school. There's just so many things within that realm that could play a huge factor in your decision. So just being true to yourself first, and being honest and being committed to your decision. Maybe I'll take one class here, but if I take one class, how am I supposed to cover this class? Is a grant going to cover it? Can I get a scholarship? Can I, do I have to take out a student loan? So all of that does play a huge role.
So my question to you is, give me one or two things that someone can do to kind of manage that. Like you said, there's a lot to juggle, there's a lot to figure out. How did you manage that to say, hey, I'm going to make this commitment, obstacles are coming, life is lifing, so to speak, but you may have paused, but you didn't stop. So any advice or tips that you could give to someone, top 2 or 3 things to say? You did say committed, stay committed to it. Anything else that they could do, or tips that kind of helped you to kind of like forge ahead?
Boundaries.
Okay.
You might see your friends out there, a family cookout, and you have a project, or you need to get some reading or some studying done. Boundaries. Can you come out to do? No. Your no is your no. People are not going to understand it at times, but it's not for them to understand. And you have to be okay with that. In my case, I have a child, as I stated earlier. Can we go compromise? We can do this, but by this time, we have to make it back home. Communication. I communicate with, maybe over-communicate, but that's okay. This is what I have to do. This is why I'm doing this. This is why this is important to me. You may not understand it right now, but you'll understand it as you get older. And so now, like, she understands. Don't you have homework to do?
So she keeps you on track.
She definitely does keep me on track.
And I was going to ask you.
Graduate in December. After you graduate, can we do?
Okay.
Aren't you going to have more time? And so now she understands the impact that all of this is having. And it actually bled over into her own studies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you doing? I have to finish this project. Okay. I'm okay with that.
So I was going to ask you, and you've kind of already started going down that path. Is how do you balance that work-life balance when you have a child? And it sounds like you're kind of leading by example is part of it. You're saying, hey, this is what we have to do.
Yep.
Here's the schedule. Work hard now. We can play a little later, so to speak.
I just told her that yesterday.
Really?
I did.
There you go.
I did.
But it sounds like it's working. So that I think is a great message for parents. If you wanted to give a word of advice, not to the parent, but to the student, not saying that your kids are going to listen and they're going to understand, but for the children to say, hey, you know what, we're in this together, but bear with me. What advice would you give to them to kind of say, kind of give me a little grace, or we're going to get this done?
Be honest. I think for my case, being transparent and being honest helped that portion of our relationship a lot. She understands, like, oh, my mom's tired. Let me not try to slide, let me make this a little bit easier for her. Because you do get tired. We're human at the end of the day. We're human. We're chasing a dream. We have so many things on our plate just being human. So taking on something additional to what other priorities you have, that is a lot. So giving yourself grace for one. I've had to learn that over time. It was very hard for me to do that. So give yourself grace for one. And I think your family, children, significant other, they have to understand that.
Right.
And if not, some conversations need to be held. Communicate. Communication is a thing.
I agree.
So
yep. Communication's key. Excuse me. I've also heard you mention staying committed. I'm also hearing you kind of saying, like, honesty, give yourself some grace. Those are all great points. And I think for For those who are in the trenches, the other thing that I think they really should hone in on is mental health is real.
Yes.
And like you said, take some breaks sometimes, factor that in, and create a system and create a strong support system
Absolutely.
that is out there. There are places sometimes within your own workplace, your employers may have some services that can assist you all throughout the process. The schools themselves, whether it's an advisor, maybe they have like student support services, and every school has a different level of resources available, but I encourage all learners to do the same thing. Maybe there is someone who has child care needs that are out there. Many may not know that child care can be used. You can use financial aid for child care, if you're, awarded certain types of financial aid. So those things, can kind of help ease some of the burden for so many people. And I don't know that everyone is aware of that, or if they feel like, they're entitled to that. You're human, and the only way that you're going to continue to get through it is if you kind of pause from time to time and make sure that your well-being, physical and mental well-being are taken care of. Being flexible, I think, also helps.
Absolutely.
Because everything that you have planned, it's not always going to work out the way that you said. And I think you kind of said that in the beginning, because you're like, you had a start period, a stop period, so you had to pivot quite often, but the key was you haven't stopped. And I think that's one of the good things. Perseverance is key. Some of the different pros and cons of going back to school at a later time for you, what would you say?
Tiffany. Let's start with the cons.
Okay.
Let's get those out of the way first. Right. The cons, honestly, I am exhausted. I wish I had more mental capacity to talk to, some friends or to go out here and there. So that's a con. Another con is time away from my daughter. I missed a lot of firsts in the earlier years because I was still trying to get my footing. And to your point, flexibility was a thing that I was just not willing to do. It had to be, oh no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it by this time. And the universe was like, no, we're not. We're not doing that. That's not going to happen. So flexibility. Another con for me would be, I guess, not asking for help sooner and not really recognizing the resources that I had out here that I could have taken advantage of. So that's another big one.
And that's a big one. That's definitely a big one that is out there. When you're thinking about the pros, so what's the good stuff here?
So the good stuff is, it is definitely well worth it. My journey is not everyone else's journey, and everyone else's journey should not look the same. So I take pride in that now. Before I didn't. The other pro is that I learned a lot about myself throughout this process. Some things I used to be embarrassed of because here I am, 30 plus, just graduating with a bachelor's, but I've seen my mom do it before me with 3 kids. Very proud of her for that. The other pro from that is that my daughter gets to see, she's still doing it, tired, being a mom, going to work full time, still trying to get me to tennis or cheerleading or whatever activity she's in at that time. I'm not denying her that time. I found a balance. So she gets to see okay, work hard, play harder. To your point. The other pro is that I did it. I'm doing it. I'm happy doing it. I took care of that mental health thing, like you said, physically, mentally, and all in all, I enjoyed my journey. Had it not been for my journey, I don't think this podcast idea probably would have came at the time that it did, but I'm happy that my experiences were able to get us here.
Me too. So. I am too. And I also want to share just a few additional resources, and you can chime in if I miss any that you found helpful along the way. So a couple things that I think of, and this applies to your traditional versus your non-traditional, and traditional and non-traditional learners that are out there. I kind of think, when you're thinking about going to a post-secondary school, number one, figure out why. Why do you want to go? And generally it's because you want to pursue a certain career. So do research on that career to figure out what is required of you, and then do research on those schools to make sure that they have the resources and the opportunities that you need. Make sure it's cost effective. Make sure you're using all the resources regarding financial aid. So you're completing that FAFSA, free application for federal student aid. For Pennsylvania students, make sure that you check to see if you qualify for the Pennsylvania state grants and any of those other special state aid programs that are offered. All of those details are available on the Fed's website, studentaid.gov, as well as FIA's websites that are out there. Also, scholarships help, and a lot of times I hear from folks, I'm not your traditional student, so there are no scholarships out there, and there are organizations who will target specific populations of people. It could be for that person who's returning to school. It could be for the parent who's returning to school. Maybe you just so happen to be going into a particular field of study, and I think sometimes our non-traditional learners think, I don't have that option, so I'm not going to bother to look for those resources. I always say become best friends with your financial aid offices that are out there, for those advisors in those schools, because they can kind of guide you with what you need or what you would have missed. Whether it's on an admission side, whether it's on the financial aid side. Get to know them, talk to them. There are resources like collegecosts.ed.gov. That's through the federal government. So that person who's looking for a career, the person who wants to research their schools, if they want to figure out the net price that's out there, all of these are resources that are there. I don't know if I've mentioned any that you've not, I haven't mentioned any that you have used, but if so, feel free to chime in. If I covered them all, that's okay too.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said speak with or become best friends with your financial aid advisor. Literally every semester I reach out. It's one person that I just kind of grew a relationship with over time, and I'll reach out to her. This is what I owe for, this coming semester. Can you help me figure out boom, boom, boom? Just so that I'm aware of any additional expenses that either the Pell Grant or the FIA State Grant or my loans won't cover. In addition to that, being in a good relationship with your financial aid advisor, either if it's with your school or, you can call up to FIA and get some additional advice, or going out to the websites, knowing what your, number is, your financial aid number is really important, especially with your non-traditional learner. Maybe they have went to school before, taken out student loans. They forget about the student loans. You are only able to take out a set amount of loans.
That's
and
a good point.
I think that that gets missed or overshadowed. So having those talks and those open lines of communication works, because you could find yourself in a real pit if you've reached that aggregate loan limit and you cannot borrow anymore for financial aid from the federal government.
Right.
So now what do you do? So like you said, scholarships, grants. I know that I've gotten a few scholarships from my current school. If you know anyone within your community that are a part of different organizations, they may have scholarships or grants that could help you with that, even if it's $200 for a book.
That's
that helps.
$200,
it's
right?
$200.
Right.
Reading a book right now is like $100 and some odd dollars just for a semester. So who's going to cover that fee? So community is important. Again, knowing about your resources are important, and making sure you check in with financial aid periodically is fairly important as well.
I think those are great points. And then in addition to that, if you happen to be the non-traditional learner who is working full-time, check with your employer.
Yes.
Some of them times they have tuition reimbursement programs that are up there. Sometimes you can get a discount with certain schools. So some employers will say, hey, if you're attending one of these schools, because you're an employee, you may get a 10% off your tuition. Some other places may go a little bit higher, but you don't know what resources are available unless you actually check with them regarding that. So I think that's also key. And a lot of them are very flexible with your scheduling and things like that. So always work with all the resources that you have available to you. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you're like, I need to make sure that they know about this?
I think we covered a lot within this session or this episode. If you need to rewind. It's a lot.
They can play it several times, right?
Yeah, just put it on a loop. It's okay.
It's a lot.
But what I really want to emphasize is just be confident. in yourself. Believe in yourself that you can do it. Your thought can transpire into action, and just get to work.
I agree, 100%. So I thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Here on the podcast. You're graduating in December.
Hopefully, December 2025.
You just said we were talking confidence here. We're going to
yes.
speak that into fruition.
I am walking
December,
in December
right?
of 2025.
And then once you graduate, what's next?
Oh gosh. What's next? I would love to go get my master's in higher education. Obviously, I have a passion for that. But we will see. So to be continued. To be continued.
So for the meantime, continue to do what you do. Study hard. Stay with it. And I know you will. When you graduate, do something fun with you and your daughter and celebrate the moment.
I have a hard time doing that, but I will.
Celebrate the moment. You have to.
Celebrate the moment.
You got to celebrate. So thanks again for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
For all of our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.